One stormy night, a barefoot poor little girl notices something suspicious happening at a millionaire CEO's mansion. No one believes her, until she bravely stops a massive robbery on her own. What the CEO does next will leave you speechless and transform her life forever, before anything else. If this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the abandoned warehouse where 8-year-old Sophia Grace huddled beneath a torn cardboard box. Her bare feet, purple with cold, tucked beneath her thin nightgown as thunder shook the rotting walls around her. She'd been living here for 3 weeks now, ever since the Henderson family had given up on her. The 4th family this year to decide she was too much trouble. Lightning illuminated the empty space around her, casting eerie shadows that would terrify most children, but Sophia had learned to find comfort in darkness. It was people who scared her now. Her stomach growled fiercely, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday when she'd found half a sandwich in a dumpster behind Patterson's Deli. The warehouse felt like a tomb tonight. With its broken beams and scattered debris, water dripped steadily from holes in the ceiling, creating puddles that reflected the occasional flash of lightning. Sophia had arranged her furniture, a stack of old newspapers for a bed, a rusty bucket for water, and a collection of empty bottles and cans that she'd hoped to trade for food money. She'd been on her own before, but never for this long. At 8 years old, she'd already lived in 12 different homes, each one promising to be different, until the novelty wore off, and she became just another burden. The social workers always had the same tired explanations: behavioral issues, attachment disorders, too difficult to handle. What they really meant was that she asked too many questions, cried too much, and reminded them of everything broken in the system. Through a gap in the boarded window, she could see the sprawling Blackwood estate across the valley, its golden lights twinkling like stars against the storm. Alexander Blackwood, the tech billionaire, lived there with his family. Sophia had read about him in old newspapers she used for warmth. He was famous for his charitable donations and innovative technology companies. She wondered if he knew children like her existed just miles from his mansion, sleeping in abandoned buildings while he lived in luxury. As she pressed her face against the cold glass, something unusual caught her eye. 3 dark figures were moving stealthily across the estate's manicured lawn, their flashlights creating dancing circles in the rain. They weren't security guards. She'd watched the property long enough to know their patterns, their timing, their routes. These men moved differently, purposefully, like predators stalking prey. The figures wore dark clothing and moved with military precision toward the mansion's east wing. Sophia's heart began to race as she watched them spread out, one taking position near the main entrance, while the other 2 continued toward what appeared to be a service door. She'd seen enough crime shows on the old television at her last foster home to recognize suspicious behavior, but more than that, she'd developed an instinct for danger during her years of survival. Should she call the police? But who would believe a homeless 8-year-old? Her previous attempts to help had only gotten her labeled as a liar, a troublemaker, a child with an overactive imagination. The last time she'd tried to report something suspicious, the officer had simply driven her back to whatever foster home she'd been running from. The figures disappeared around the corner of the mansion, and Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold rain. She thought of the family inside. She'd seen them in newspaper photos. Alexander Blackwood had a wife, Margaret, and a young daughter named Grace who looked about 6 years old, the same age as her sister Victoria, who'd been placed in a different home months ago. The thought of something happening to that little girl, of her experiencing the kind of fear and helplessness that Sophia knew all too well, made her decision for her. She pushed aside her cardboard shelter, ignored the protests of her aching, hungry body, and stepped into the freezing rain. Her bare feet squelched in the mud as she began running across the fields toward the estate. her small heart pounding with determination and terror. Behind her, the abandoned warehouse stood like a monument to her loneliness, but ahead lay a choice that would change everything. The security fence around the Blackwood estate was 12 feet high and topped with decorative iron spikes, but Sophia had always been a skilled climber. Her former foster brother Marcus had taught her the technique before she'd been moved to yet another home 6 months ago. The cold metal stung her bare hands as she pulled herself up, rain making every grip treacherous and slippery. She dropped silently into the perfectly maintained garden, her feet immediately squelching in the expensive landscaping mud. The mansion loomed before her like something from a fairy tale, its Gothic revival architecture, all towers and arched windows, glowing warmly from within. Through the grand windows, she could see shadows moving behind rich curtains. The family was home, completely unaware of the danger creeping around their property. The contrast between her world and theirs hit her like a physical blow. Here were flower beds that probably cost more than most people's cars, perfectly trimmed hedges shaped into artistic spirals, and a fountain that gurgled peacefully despite the storm. Sophia had never seen such beauty up close, had never walked on grass so soft it felt like carpet beneath her bleeding feet. She crept toward the east wing, following the path the 3 men had taken. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain it would give her away. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound made her flinch, but she pressed on, driven by something stronger than fear, the knowledge that innocent people were in danger. Behind a perfectly trimmed topiary shaped like a swan, she found their point of entry. A basement window had been expertly cut open, the glass shards scattered on the mulch below. The work was professional, precise, not the crude break-in of amateurs. These men knew what they were doing. From inside came the sound of muffled voices and electronic beeping. She pressed her ear to the window frame, straining to hear over the storm and her own rapid breathing. The safe's behind that painting of the old man, just like the blueprint showed, whispered a gravelly voice with a slight accent. Rodriguez, keep watch at the stairs. Thompson, start on the electronic lock. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the next security sweep. Boss, this system's more sophisticated than we thought, came another voice, younger and nervous. It's got multiple layers of encryption. Give me 10 minutes, maybe 15. Make it 10. The first voice replied coldly. I didn't spend 6 months planning this job to get sloppy now. Sophia's blood ran cold. They were robbing the mansion while the family slept upstairs, and they'd been planning this for months. These weren't desperate criminals acting on impulse. They were professional thieves with detailed knowledge of the house's security systems and layout. She thought of little Grace Blackwood, only 6 years old, sleeping peacefully in her bed while dangerous men moved through her home. What if the family woke up? What if they came downstairs for a late-night snack or to check on a sound? What if these men were armed and desperate? The rain continued to pound down, soaking through her thin nightgown and chilling her to the bone. Sophia realized she was completely alone in this moment, faced with a choice that would define her character forever. She could run back to the warehouse, convince herself it wasn't her problem, and hope for the best. Or she could find a way to help, even if it meant putting herself in terrible danger. But then she remembered something her mother had told her years ago, before the accident that had left Sophia orphaned and alone. Sometimes, sweetheart, being small means you can do things others can't. Sometimes being invisible is your greatest strength, and sometimes doing the right thing is the only thing that matters. Sophia wiped the rain from her eyes and began to formulate a plan. She might be just a homeless 8-year-old with nothing to lose, but she wouldn't let this family be hurt. Not if she could help it. Sophia circled the mansion, staying low beneath the windows and using the landscaping for cover. The building was even more impressive up close. She counted at least 40 windows on the ground floor alone, each one glowing with warm light that spoke of comfort and security. The main electrical box was exactly where she had expected, mounted on the side of the house near the service entrance, and protected by a simple plastic cover. Her time with Tommy Rodriguez, an electrician who'd fostered her briefly last year, had taught her more about electrical systems than most adults knew. Tommy had been kind but overwhelmed, eventually admitting he couldn't handle a difficult child while working 60-hour weeks. But during their 2 months together, he'd shown her the basics of electrical work, never imagining she'd need the knowledge to save lives. The robbers' voices drifted from the basement window as she worked, their confidence growing with each passing minute. They spoke in low tones, but the storm carried their words clearly to her hiding spot. "Almost got it," she heard Thompson say. "This is a Mosler double guard system, top of the line. But I've cracked these before. Another 5 minutes and we'll have access to everything." "Good," the boss replied. "Rodriguez, any movement upstairs?" "All quiet. Looks like the family's sleeping soundly. Weather's perfect cover for us." Sophia's small fingers worked quickly on the electrical panel, her heart pounding as she identified the main circuit breaker. The system was more complex than Tommy's simple residential setups, but the principles were the same. She took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and threw the main breaker. The entire mansion plunged into darkness. Immediately, chaos erupted from the basement. "What the hell happened?" Rodriguez shouted, his voice sharp with panic. "Thompson, what did you do?" the boss demanded. "I didn't do anything. The power just went out. The whole system's dead. This is bad, real bad. We need to go now. But we're so close, 5 more minutes and—" "Forget it. Something's wrong. Pack it up." Sophia heard scrambling from below, tools being hastily gathered, voices raised in argument. She knew the backup generator would kick in within 90 seconds. She'd seen similar systems in other wealthy neighborhoods during her various placements. But 90 seconds was all she needed. She sprinted to the front of the house, her bare feet sliding on the wet stone steps, and began pounding on the massive oak door with both fists. "Help! Help!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "There are robbers in your basement. Please, someone help!" Inside, she could hear movement, confused voices, the sound of people waking up suddenly. Emergency lighting flickered on as the backup generator hummed to life, casting the mansion in an eerie red glow. "There are 3 men in your basement!" She continued shouting, her voice raw with desperation. "They're trying to rob your safe. I saw them break in through the east window." The door flew open, revealing Alexander Blackwood himself, a tall man in his early 40s with kind eyes and graying hair at his temples, wearing a burgundy silk robe. Behind him stood his wife Margaret, elegant even in her nightgown, and their security chief, a burly man named Davidson, who was already reaching for his radio. "What in the world?" Alexander began, then stopped as he took in the sight before him. A tiny, soaking wet girl in a torn nightgown, barefoot and shivering, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "There are 3 men in your basement," Sophia gasped between chattering teeth. "They cut through the window. They're trying to open your safe. I heard them talking. They've been planning this for months." Alexander's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Davidson was already speaking into his radio, calling for backup, when they heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass from the basement level. "Get them!" Davidson shouted to his team, and armed security guards rushed toward the basement stairs. Davidson and 3 security guards rushed toward the basement, while Alexander wrapped Sophia in his silk robe, her small body shaking uncontrollably from cold. Adrenaline and the overwhelming relief of being believed. Margaret had already called 911, her voice steady despite the chaos, while their daughter Grace peered curiously from the top of the grand staircase. "How did you know they were there?" Alexander asked gently, crouching to Sophia's eye level. His voice was warm, paternal. Everything she'd dreamed a father might sound like. Sophia pointed toward the valley with a trembling finger. "I live over there, in the old Patterson warehouse. I've been watching your house for weeks, learning the patterns of your security guards. These men move differently, like hunters, not protectors. Alexander's heart clenched. This brave child had been living alone in an abandoned warehouse, surviving on her own while keeping watch over his family. How long have you been living there, sweetheart? 3 weeks this time, Sophia replied quietly. Since the Henderson family said they couldn't handle me anymore, I'm too much trouble for most people. Margaret appeared with thick towels and a warm blanket, immediately wrapping Sophia up with the practiced efficiency of a mother. "You poor darling," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No child should have to live like that." From the basement came sounds of struggle, shouting. Then Davidson's voice over the radio. "We've got 2 in custody. Third one escaped through the window, but he dropped his equipment. Police are en route, ETA 3 minutes. Alexander felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. "Sophia, do you understand what you did tonight? You saved my family. You saved my little girl. My wife. Everything that matters most to me in this world." Sophia looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much for her 8 years. "I couldn't let them hurt you. I know what bad people do to families. I couldn't let that happen to Grace." The police arrived, sirens cutting through the storm. Detective Martinez took Sophia's statement. Amazed at the detailed description she provided, she'd noticed the men's heights, their clothing, their voices, even the specific tools they'd carried. Her observations were more thorough than most trained witnesses. "These were professionals," Detective Martinez told Alexander as they watched the captured robbers being led away. "Part of a sophisticated ring that's been targeting wealthy families across 3 states. They had detailed blueprints of your house, your security schedule, even your family's daily routines. Without this young lady's intervention, they would have gotten away with millions. The third robber, the one who'd escaped, had left behind enough evidence to identify him. Within hours, warrants would be issued for the entire criminal network." Alexander was barely listening to the detective's explanation. His attention was focused on Sophia, who had fallen asleep in Margaret's arms, finally safe and warm for the first time in weeks. He thought of his own daughter Grace, sleeping peacefully upstairs, protected by love and security that this brave child had never known. "Detective," Alexander said quietly, "I need to know everything about Sophia's situation. Her legal status, her caseworker, her history in the system. This child will never spend another night in that warehouse." Detective Martinez nodded. "I'll have social services contact you first thing in the morning, but Mr. Blackwood, you should know, her case is complicated. She's been through multiple placements, labeled as difficult to place. The system has essentially given up on her." "Then the system has failed," Alexander replied firmly. "But we won't." Margaret looked down at Sophia's sleeping face, so peaceful now despite the exhaustion and trauma. "She's exactly what this family needs," she whispered. "A daughter brave enough to risk everything for people she doesn't even know." As the last of the police cars drove away, Alexander made a decision that would change all their lives forever. This remarkable child had saved his family. Now it was time for his family to save her. The next morning, Sophia woke up in a bed so soft she thought she was dreaming. Egyptian cotton sheets, down pillows, and a cashmere blanket surrounded her like a cloud. Sunlight streamed through silk curtains, and she could smell bacon cooking somewhere in the vast house, a scent that made her stomach growl with desperate hunger. For a moment she forgot where she was, then remembered the storm, the robbers, and the kind man who'd wrapped her in his robe. She found clothes laid out for her, a beautiful blue dress with delicate white flowers, matching white shoes that actually fit her feet, and undergarments softer than anything she'd ever owned. When she made her way downstairs, Following the sound of voices and the incredible smell of food, she discovered Alexander in his study. The room was like a library from a movie, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive mahogany desk, and leather chairs that looked like they'd been crafted by master artisans. He was surrounded by papers and speaking intently into the phone. "Yes, I understand the process is complicated," he was saying, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to getting things done. "But I want to expedite everything. This child has been failed by the system repeatedly, and she needs stability now, not bureaucratic delays." He looked up and saw Sophia in the doorway, her small frame dwarfed by the grand surroundings. "I'll call you back, Janet. We'll have the paperwork ready by noon." He hung up and smiled at her, a warmth in his expression that made her chest tight with unfamiliar emotions. "Good morning, hero. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Sophia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I should probably go back to the warehouse. I don't want to be trouble for your family." Alexander's expression grew serious. He stood up and walked over to her, then knelt down to her eye level, something no adult had ever done before. "Sophia, you're not trouble. You're the bravest person I've ever met, and Margaret and I have been talking to social services about your situation." Sophia's heart sank. She'd heard those words before, always followed by another move, another disappointment, another family who eventually decided she was too much work. "It's okay, Mr. Blackwood. I understand. I'll just pack up and—" "No, Sophia, you don't understand." Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. "Margaret and I don't want you to go anywhere. We want to adopt you. We want you to become part of our family permanently." The words hit her like a physical blow. Adopt? Permanently? After 12 failed placements, after being labeled unadoptable by 3 different agencies, after convincing herself that she was destined to age out of the system alone. But I'm trouble," she whispered, tears starting to fall. "Everyone says so. I get angry sometimes, and I break things, and I have nightmares, and I ask too many questions, and I—" "You're not trouble," Margaret said, appearing in the doorway with Grace, who was curious about their overnight guest. "You're exactly what this family needs, a daughter who's brave enough to risk everything for people she doesn't even know." Grace, with her blonde curls and bright smile, walked up to Sophia shyly. "Daddy said you saved us from bad men. Thank you for protecting our family." Sophia knelt down to Grace's level, seeing herself at that age, before the foster homes, before the disappointments, before she'd learned that love was temporary and families were just way stations. "I have a little sister somewhere," she said softly. "Her name is Victoria, and she's 6, just like you. They separated us because they said I was a bad influence on her." Alexander felt tears sting his eyes. "What's Victoria's last name, Sophia? Where is she now?" "Victoria Grace Chen. She's in a foster home in Portland. They said she was more adoptable without me around." The words came out bitter, colored by months of pain and rejection. Margaret exchanged a look with Alexander. They'd already discussed this possibility during their late-night conversation after the police had left. "Sophia, would you like to see Victoria again?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "More than anything in the world, but they won't let me. They said I'm not stable enough, that I'd disrupt her placement." "Things are going to change," Alexander said firmly. "For you, for Victoria, for everything. You saved my family, Sophia. Now let us save yours." 2 months later, Sophia stood in the courthouse wearing a beautiful white dress with pearl buttons, her hair styled in soft curls by Margaret's personal stylist. Beside her stood Victoria, whom Alexander's team of attorneys had located and successfully petitioned to have transferred to their custody. The reunion had been tearful and joyful, 2 sisters who'd thought they'd lost each other forever. Judge Patricia Coleman smiled down at them from the bench, her expression warm but official. "This is one of the most remarkable adoption cases I've ever presided over," she said. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, you're requesting to adopt not one, but two children with challenging histories." "Yes, Your Honor," Alexander replied, his arm around Sophia's shoulders. "These sisters belong together. Sophia's courage saved my family, and now we want to give her and Victoria the family they deserve." Judge Coleman looked at Sophia. "Young lady, you've been through quite an ordeal over the years. Multiple placements, difficult transitions, separation from your sister. Are you ready to have a permanent family?" Sophia looked up at Alexander and Margaret, then at Victoria, who was holding Grace's hand. Around them sat a courtroom full of supporters. Detective Martinez, social workers who'd worked on the case, even Davidson and several security guards who'd become fond of the girls. "Yes, ma'am," Sophia said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. "I'm ready to have a real family. And I'm ready to help other kids find theirs too. Then by the power vested in me by the state of California, I hereby finalize the adoption of Sophia Grace Blackwood and Victoria Margaret Blackwood. Congratulations to the new family." The courtroom erupted in applause. Sophia felt Alexander's strong arms around her, Margaret's gentle kiss on her forehead, and Victoria's small hand squeezing hers. For the first time in her life, she truly belonged somewhere. But the biggest surprise came when they returned to the mansion. Alexander had arranged for a celebration, but he had one more surprise for Sophia. "There's something else," he said, leading her to the library where they'd first talked about her future. "The insurance company wanted to give you a reward for stopping the robbery, but Margaret and I told them you deserved something better." He handed her a legal document bound in blue leather. "This is a trust fund, Sophia. It's not just for you. It's for other children like you and Victoria, children who need homes, who need someone to believe in them." Sophia stared at the papers, overwhelmed. "You mean I can help other kids?" "That's exactly what I mean. When you're older, you'll help run the Sophia Grace Foundation. We'll find families for kids in foster care, provide resources for adoptive families, and make sure no child ever has to sleep in an abandoned warehouse again." Alexander knelt down to her level one more time. "You'll never have to worry about having a home again, sweetheart. And you'll help make sure other children don't have to worry either." Sophia hugged Alexander tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would." "Thank you for saving my family," Alexander replied. "But Sophia, you didn't just save us that night. You saved yourself too. You showed us all what real courage looks like." As the celebration continued around them, Sophia looked out the window toward the valley, where the abandoned warehouse still stood. But now it seemed like a distant memory, a dark chapter that had led to this bright new beginning. She thought of all the other children out there, alone and afraid, waiting for someone to believe in them. Thanks to Alexander's generosity and her own brave heart, she'd spent her life making sure they found their way home too. The little girl who'd had nothing, not even shoes, had gained everything: a family, a future, and the power to change other lives forever. And this was just the beginning of her story. 5 years had passed since that stormy night, and 13-year-old Sophia Grace Blackwood stood before the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting her navy blue blazer with the foundation's logo embroidered in gold thread. Today was the grand opening of the Sophia Grace Foundation's first residential facility for children aging out of foster care. The scared, barefoot girl who once lived in an abandoned warehouse had become a poised young woman with a mission that burned in her heart like a flame. "Sophia, are you ready?" Margaret called from downstairs, her voice carrying the warmth that had become Sophia's anchor over the years. "The reporters are arriving, and Channel 7 wants to do a live interview before the ceremony." Sophia took a deep breath, remembering the media training Alexander had arranged with the best public relations firm in Los Angeles. She'd initially been terrified of public speaking, her voice shaking whenever she had to address more than a few people. But her passion for helping other children had gradually overcome her fear, transforming her from a shy girl into an eloquent advocate. The foundation had already placed 43 children in permanent homes, and today they were opening Haven House, a transitional living facility for teens who'd aged out of the system without ever finding a family. The building was beautiful, designed to feel like a home rather than an institution, with individual bedrooms, common areas, and a state-of-the-art kitchen where residents could learn life skills. Downstairs, the mansion buzzed with controlled chaos. Victoria, now 11 and equally passionate about their cause, was helping arrange flowers in the foyer while discussing college prep programs with their tutor. Grace, also 11 and Sophia's closest friend, was practicing her speech for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The three girls had become inseparable, their bond strengthened by shared purpose and genuine sisterhood. "Remember," Alexander said as they rode to the ceremony in their limousine, "you're not just cutting a ribbon today, you're opening doors for kids who've been forgotten by the system, kids just like you were." Sophia nodded, clutching the speech she'd written and rewritten dozens of times. She'd memorized every word, every pause, every emphasis that would help her connect with the audience. But as their limousine pulled up to Haven House, she saw something that made her blood run cold, and her carefully prepared words vanish from her mind. Standing among the crowd of reporters, politicians, and dignitary supporters was a face she'd hoped never to see again. Michael Thompson, one of the robbers from that night 5 years ago. He was older now, grayer, wearing a maintenance uniform with Henderson Construction embroidered on the pocket, but those cold, calculating eyes were unmistakable. "Sophia, what's wrong?" Margaret asked, immediately noticing the way her daughter's face had gone pale. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Sophia couldn't speak. Her throat felt like it was closing, her heart hammering against her ribs. Thompson caught her eye across the crowd and gave her a knowing smile that sent chills down her spine. He touched his finger to his lips in a silencing gesture, then pointed deliberately toward the group of vulnerable teenagers who'd gathered to watch the ceremony. The message was crystal clear, one word from her about his identity, and the children would be in danger. Sophia stepped out of the limousine on shaking legs, her mind racing with possibilities. She'd spent 5 years building this foundation, helping vulnerable children find hope and safety. Now the very man she'd helped put in prison was here, somehow working at the facility, threatening everything she'd worked for. As she walked toward the podium, Sophia realized this was no coincidence. Michael Thompson had been released early from prison, and somehow he'd found his way back into her life. The question that terrified her most was, what did he want, and how far would he go to get it? The crowd fell silent as Sophia approached the microphone, her prepared speech forgotten. She looked out at the sea of faces, social workers, politicians, reporters, and most importantly, the 12 teenagers who would call Haven House home. 5 years ago, she began, her voice steadier than she felt, I was a scared, homeless 8-year-old with nothing to lose. Today, I stand before you as proof that every child deserves a chance at a real family, a safe home, and a bright future. But even as she spoke the words that had taken her years to believe, Sophia's eyes kept drifting to Michael Thompson, who stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her every move with that same predatory smile that haunted her nightmares. The ribbon-cutting ceremony proceeded flawlessly on the surface, but Sophia's mind was elsewhere, calculating exits, identifying potential threats, and trying to figure out how Thompson had infiltrated their operation. As soon as the formal events ended and the crowd began to disperse, she excused herself from the receiving line and followed Thompson as he walked toward the building's service entrance. Her heart pounded, but she knew she had to confront him. The alternative, living in fear, wondering what he was planning, was worse than facing him directly. "Sophia Grace Blackwood," Thompson said without turning around, his voice carrying the same cold amusement she remembered from that night. Or should I say, Sophia Grace Nobody. It's amazing what money and family connections can do for a girl's reputation. "What do you want, Thompson?" Sophia demanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Thompson turned slowly, his smile cold and calculating. "Justice. You cost me 5 years of my life, little girl. 5 years in maximum security prison because you couldn't mind your own business that night. You were stealing from innocent people," Sophia shot back, her anger beginning to overcome her fear. "You belonged in prison. You still do." "Maybe. But I learned a lot while I was there. Like how to research people, how to plan better, how to find weaknesses in even the most secure systems." He gestured toward the building behind him. "This foundation of yours is quite impressive. All those vulnerable children depending on you for safety and security." Sophia's blood ran cold. "If you hurt any of these kids, I swear, hurt them." "I'm not here to hurt anyone, Sophia. I'm here to collect what's owed to me." Thompson pulled out a tablet, swiping to show her detailed financial records. "Your precious foundation has been skimming money from donations, $25,000 to be exact, money that's been diverted to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." "That's impossible," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I oversee every transaction. I review every financial report." "Do you? Or do you just trust the people around you to handle the boring details?" Thompson's smile widened. "I've been working here for 3 months, Sophia. 3 months of access to your computer systems, your financial records, your personal information. It's amazing what a maintenance worker can learn when people treat him like he's invisible." Sophia realized with growing horror that Thompson had been planning this revenge for years. "You're framing the foundation. You're stealing money and making it look like we're embezzling." "Smart girl. And tomorrow morning, an anonymous tip will go to the FBI about your foundation's financial irregularities. They'll find evidence of systematic fraud dating back 2 years. Your adoptive father's reputation will be ruined, the foundation will be shut down, and all those poor children will be back where they started. You're destroying innocent lives for revenge," Sophia said, her voice thick with disgust. "I'm balancing the scales. You played hero 5 years ago, and it cost me my freedom. Now you can play victim, and it'll cost you your legacy." Thompson leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Unless, of course, we can come to an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" $750,000 transferred to my offshore account by midnight tonight. In exchange, the evidence disappears, your foundation continues its noble work, and all those precious children stay safe and sound." Sophia's mind raced. $750,000 would cripple the foundation's operations for years. But if the FBI investigated and found evidence of embezzlement, even fabricated evidence, it would destroy everything they'd built and help dozens of children who were counting on them. "You're asking me to choose between the foundation's future and its reputation," Sophia said. "I'm asking you to pay for what you did to me 5 years ago. You cost me my freedom, my reputation, my future. Now I'm offering you a chance to buy yours back." Thompson began walking away, then paused. "You have until midnight, Sophia. After that, I make the call, and your foundation becomes another cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people. And remember, I know where you live, where your sister goes to school, where your family shops and eats and sleeps. Cross me, and it won't just be your foundation that suffers." The threat hung in the air like poison as Thompson disappeared into the building, leaving Sophia standing alone in the shadows, facing the hardest decision of her young life. Sophia sat in her bedroom that night, staring at her laptop screen, with tears streaming down her face. The Foundation's accounts showed exactly what Thompson had claimed. $25,000 mysteriously diverted to an offshore account over the past 3 months. The evidence was sophisticated, convincing, and completely fabricated. But it would be nearly impossible to prove that in court. She'd spent hours studying the financial records, looking for patterns, for mistakes, for anything that might expose Thompson's fraud. The transactions had been made during specific maintenance windows, all during times when Thompson would have had access to the building's computer systems. But more importantly, she'd noticed something he'd missed in his arrogance. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Sophia?" Alexander's voice was gentle, concerned. "Margaret and I saw your light was still on. Are you all right?" Emma looked up as her adoptive parents entered the room. Alexander wore the same worried expression he'd had that first night when he'd found her shivering on his doorstep. Margaret carried a tray of hot chocolate and homemade cookies, a tradition they'd maintained since Sophia's first week in the house. "I need to tell you something," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that might destroy everything we've built." For the next hour, Sophia told them everything, about recognizing Thompson, about his threats, about the fabricated evidence. Alexander's expression grew darker with each revelation, his hands clenching into fists. Margaret's eyes filled with tears of anger and protective fury. "That monster," Margaret whispered, "after everything you've accomplished, everything you've overcome, he wants to destroy it all for revenge." "We're calling the FBI right now," Alexander said, reaching for his phone. "Let them sort out the real evidence from the fake. We have the best lawyers in the country and we'll fight this." "Wait," Sophia said, stopping him with a gentle hand on his arm. "I have a different idea. Thompson thinks he's smarter than he is, but he made several crucial mistakes. He's been so focused on framing the foundation that he forgot about the most important lesson I learned 5 years ago." "What's that?" Alexander asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Sometimes being invisible is your greatest strength, and sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to let him think he's already won." Sophia turned her laptop screen toward them, showing detailed security camera footage. "Thompson has been working at Haven House for 3 months, but he's not the only one who's been watching and learning." Badul. The screen showed Thompson entering the computer room at 2:47 a.m. 3 nights ago, using his maintenance keycard to access areas he had no business being in. Sophia fast-forwarded through the footage, showing him systematically accessing the Foundation's financial systems and making the fraudulent transfers. He thought he was being clever, working in the middle of the night when no one would notice, Sophia continued, but he forgot that homeless kids learn to be very good at staying awake, staying alert, and noticing when something doesn't belong. Margaret's expression shifted from despair to pride. "You've been conducting surveillance on him for 3 months. Ever since I recognized him at the job fair where we hired maintenance staff. I knew he was planning something, but I wanted to see the full scope of his plan before I acted." Sophia pulled up more footage, showing Thompson's illegal activities in detail. "I have video evidence of everything he's done, every system he's accessed illegally, every piece of evidence he's fabricated." Alexander shook his head in amazement. "You've been running your own investigation all this time?" "I learned from the best," Sophia replied, thinking of Detective Martinez, who'd become a mentor and friend over the years. "But I also learned something else. Thompson is wrong about one thing. I'm not the same scared 8-year-old who exposed him 5 years ago. I'm stronger now, smarter, and I have people who believe in me." Sophia stood up, her fear replaced by steely determination. "We're not paying him a penny. Instead, we're going to finish what I started that night in the storm. We're going to stop him, legally and permanently, and make sure he can never hurt another child again." Alexander pulled Sophia into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you. But this time you're not facing him alone." "No," Sophia agreed, feeling the warmth and strength of her family's support. "This time, we finish it together." The next morning, Sophia walked into Haven House with a small recording device hidden in her blazer pocket, her heart steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. The FBI had been briefed on the situation, and Detective Martinez was positioned in an unmarked van outside the building with a full surveillance team. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Get Thompson to confess to his crimes on tape, then let the authorities handle the rest. Sophia found Thompson in the basement maintenance room, exactly where she'd expected him to be. He was hunched over a laptop, probably preparing his anonymous tip to the FBI, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. He looked up as she entered, his smile confident and predatory. "Well, well, the little hero comes to pay her debts. I have to admit, I'm impressed you're being so cooperative. Do you have my money?" "I have something better," Sophia replied, keeping her voice steady and controlled. "I have a counteroffer that I think you'll find very interesting." Thompson laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're not in a position to negotiate, little girl. It's $750,000 by midnight, or the FBI gets their anonymous tip about your foundation's financial irregularities. Those are the only two options. What if I told you there was a way for you to get much more than $750,000, Sophia said, stepping closer with feigned desperation. What if I told you there was a way to destroy the Blackwood family completely and walk away rich enough to disappear forever? Thompson's eyes narrowed with sharp interest. I'm listening. Alexander Blackwood keeps his personal financial records on the same server as the Foundation. If someone were to access those records, they'd find evidence of massive tax evasion, hidden offshore accounts, insider trading, enough to put him in prison for decades and seize all his assets. And why would you help me destroy your precious adoptive father? Thompson asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. Sophia forced herself to look defeated, broken, channeling all the pain and rejection she'd felt before the Blackwoods had saved her. Because you're right about one thing, I'm tired of being grateful. Tired of being the perfect adopted daughter, the poster child for their charity work. Tired of pretending that I belong in their world when I know I'll always be just another foster kid they took pity on. She paused, letting the lie settle and take root in his greedy mind. Help me access Alexander's personal financial files, and we'll split everything we can steal from his accounts, 60-40, in your favor. That's at least $50 million, Thompson, enough to disappear and live like a king for the rest of your life. Thompson studied her face intently, looking for any sign of deception. You're lying. This is some kind of trap. Am I? 5 years ago, I was a scared kid who thought heroes always won and justice always prevailed. Now I'm a teenager who's learned that the world doesn't care about doing the right thing. It only cares about money, power, and looking out for yourself. If you're serious about this, prove it, Thompson demanded. Show me these files. Show me the evidence. Sophia led him to the main computer terminal, her heart racing, but her expression perfectly controlled. She entered her access codes with steady fingers, then navigated to what appeared to be Alexander's personal financial folder. In reality, it was a sophisticated dummy folder that Alexander, Detective Martinez, and a team of FBI cybercrime specialists had created, filled with convincing but completely fabricated evidence. There, Sophia said, pointing to the screen with trembling fingers. $25 million in hidden Cayman Islands accounts, stock manipulation worth another $40 million in illegal profits, and tax fraud dating back 15 years to when he first started his company. Thompson's eyes lit up with pure greed as he scanned the fabricated documents. How do we access the actual accounts? Simple. We transfer everything to a new offshore account that we control jointly. Then we both disappear. Alexander will be ruined. The foundation will collapse, and we'll be rich enough to start over anywhere in the world. You're really serious about this, Thompson said, his voice filled with amazement and growing excitement. You actually want to destroy the family that saved you from the streets? They didn't save me, Sophia replied, her voice perfectly bitter. They used me for their own purposes, made me a symbol for their charity work, a poster child for their guilty consciences. I'm tired of being their pet project, their feel-good story. It's time I got something real out of this arrangement. Thompson began typing frantically on the keyboard, his fingers flying over the keys as he attempted to access the fabricated accounts. You know what, kid? I completely underestimated you. You're more like me than I ever imagined. Maybe I am, Sophia said, then spoke louder, directly into her hidden microphone. But there's one crucial difference between us, Thompson. I know the difference between right and wrong. I know that stealing from families, threatening children, and destroying people's lives for personal gain makes you a monster. And I know that monsters need to be stopped. Thompson spun around, his face twisted with rage and the dawning realization that he'd been completely outmaneuvered. You little FBI, don't move! Detective Martinez burst through the door, followed by 6 federal agents in tactical gear. Michael Thompson, you're under arrest for extortion, computer fraud, identity theft, and violation of your parole terms. As the agents handcuffed Thompson, he stared at Sophia with pure, concentrated hatred. You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll get out again, and when I do— No, you won't, Sophia replied calmly, her voice carrying a maturity far beyond her 13 years. 5 years ago, you tried to steal from my family. Today, you tried to destroy the work we've built to help vulnerable children. Both times, you failed because you fundamentally misunderstood what you were up against. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You thought you were dealing with a scared little girl who got lucky once. But I'm not that girl anymore. I'm someone who's learned to fight for what matters. Someone who's surrounded by people who believe in doing the right thing, and someone who will never, ever let you hurt another child. Thompson was led away in handcuffs, his threats echoing uselessly in the empty room. Sophia stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of 5 years of intermittent fear and anxiety finally lifting completely from her shoulders. Detective Martinez approached her, a proud smile creasing his weathered face. Outstanding work, Sophia. That was some of the most professional undercover work I've ever seen, especially from someone your age. You've got natural instincts for this kind of thing. I had excellent teachers, Sophia replied, thinking of all the lessons she'd learned from Detective Martinez over the years. And I had something Thompson never understood. A family and a cause worth fighting for. Alexander and Margaret rushed into the room. Having watched the entire operation from the surveillance van, Margaret immediately pulled Sophia into a fierce embrace, tears streaming down her face. I'm so proud of you, Margaret whispered, and so grateful that you're safe. We all are, Alexander added, his voice thick with emotion. But Sophia, you took an incredible risk. What if something had gone wrong? Then we would have dealt with it together, Sophia replied simply. That's what families do. 3 hours later, they stood in the federal courthouse, watching as Judge Patricia Coleman, the same judge who'd finalized Sophia's adoption, reviewed the evidence against Thompson. The courtroom was packed with supporters. The Blackwood family, Haven House residents, foundation staff, and dozens of children whose lives had been touched by Sophia's work. Mr. Thompson, Judge Coleman said sternly, this court has rarely seen such a calculated and malicious attempt to destroy a charitable organization. Your actions targeted vulnerable children and sought to eliminate resources that provide hope and stability to those who need it most. The judge continued. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Video surveillance, computer forensics, recorded confessions, and witness testimony all point to a pattern of criminal behavior that this court finds absolutely despicable. You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As Thompson was led away for the final time, Sophia felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Detective Martinez, who had become like a grandfather to her over the years. "How does it feel to finally close this chapter permanently?" he asked. "Like I can finally breathe freely," Sophia replied, "but also like there's so much more work to do. While we were dealing with Thompson's revenge, there were children who needed our help. That's time and energy we can't get back." "Sophia," Detective Martinez said gently, "in the 5 years since that night, your foundation has helped place over 400 children in permanent homes. You've opened 6 Haven House facilities across 3 states. You've lobbied for legislation that's improved the foster care system nationwide. Don't let one bitter criminal make you forget the incredible impact you've had." Outside the courthouse, the Blackwood family was surrounded by reporters, but this time, Sophia felt ready to face them. She watched as Alexander fielded questions about the case, his voice strong and confident. Margaret stood beside him, radiant with pride and relief. Victoria and Grace flanked Sophia, their support as constant as gravity. "Sophia," a reporter called out, "what's next for the Sophia Grace Foundation?" Sophia stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "We're announcing our most ambitious project yet. With the support of the Blackwood family, our board of directors, and partners across the country, we're launching the National Foster Care Reform Initiative. Our goal is to ensure that every child in the American foster care system has access to a permanent, loving home within the next 10 years. 10 years later, Sophia Grace Blackwood stood in the rose garden of the White House, wearing an elegant navy suit and holding a crystal award that caught the afternoon sunlight like a prism. President Matthews had just presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, for her transformative work in foster care reform. Sophia's foundation has successfully placed over 60,000 children in permanent homes, the president announced to the gathered crowd of dignitaries, politicians, and advocates. Her tireless advocacy has led to comprehensive foster care reform in all 50 states and has inspired similar programs in 12 other countries. At 23 years old, she has already changed more lives than most people could in several lifetimes. Sophia looked out at the audience, seeing faces that had become part of her extended family over the years. Alexander and Margaret sat in the front row, their eyes shining with unmistakable pride. Alexander's hair had gone completely grey, but his smile was as warm as ever. Margaret had become a powerful advocate in her own right, serving on the boards of multiple children's charities. Victoria, now 21 and the Foundation's Director of Operations, was beaming with pride. She'd grown into a brilliant young woman, passionate about child welfare policy and legislative reform. Grace, also 21, and working as a licensed social worker, was wiping away tears of joy. Detective Martinez, now retired but still Sophia's mentor and friend, sat with Judge Coleman, who had officiated hundreds of adoptions through Sophia's foundation over the years. Even some of the original Haven House residents were there, now adults with families of their own, living testament to the program's success. "When I was 8 years old," Sophia began her acceptance speech, her voice carrying clearly across the rose garden, "I was a homeless girl living in an abandoned warehouse. I had nothing, and not even shoes. I was angry, scared, and absolutely convinced that the world had forgotten people like me existed." The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word from this remarkable young woman who had transformed personal tragedy into national change. But that night, when I saw danger threatening a family I didn't even know, I learned something that changed my life forever. I learned that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you're absolutely terrified of the consequences." Sophia paused, remembering that stormy night that seemed like a lifetime ago, when a barefoot girl had chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it. Alexander and Margaret Blackwood didn't just save my life when they adopted me. They showed me that every child deserves a family, a safe home, and the chance to reach their full potential. They taught me that being loved isn't a privilege to be earned. It's a basic human right that every child should have. She looked directly at the cameras, knowing that millions of people around the world were watching this moment. Today, I'm incredibly proud to announce that the Sophia Grace Foundation has achieved something that many thought was impossible. For the first time in American history, there are no children aging out of the foster care system without a permanent family. Every child in care has either been adopted, placed with permanent guardians, or is actively in the process of family placement. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause that seemed to go on forever. Sophia waited for quiet, then continued with the announcement she'd been planning for months. But this achievement isn't the end of our work. It's the foundation for what comes next. We're now expanding our mission internationally, working with organizations around the world to ensure that every child, everywhere, has a family to call home. We're also launching the Sophia Grace Institute for Child Welfare, which will train the next generation of advocates and social workers. As she concluded her speech, Sophia's mind drifted back to that 8-year-old girl huddled in the warehouse, watching the Blackwood mansion from afar. That little girl could never have imagined this moment, this recognition, this incredible impact on the world. After the ceremony, Sophia walked with Alexander and Margaret through the White House gardens, the late afternoon sun painting everything in golden light. The rose bushes were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air with sweetness. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't seen those robbers that night?" Alexander asked. His voice thoughtful. Sophia considered the question carefully. "I think about it sometimes, but I've learned that life isn't about the paths we didn't take. It's about making the most of the path we're on and using our experiences, both good and bad, to help others." "You've certainly made the most of yours," Margaret said, linking her arm through Sophia's. That scared little girl became a force for good that's changed the entire world. "No," Sophia replied, her voice soft but certain. "That scared little girl was always a force for good. She just needed a family to believe in her, to show her that her worth wasn't determined by her circumstances." As they walked back toward the White House, Sophia thought about all the children who would go to sleep tonight in safe, loving homes because of the Foundation's work. Children who would never know the fear of sleeping in abandoned buildings, never wonder if anyone in the world cared about them, never feel the crushing weight of being too much trouble for a family to love. The barefoot girl, who had risked everything to save strangers, had grown into a woman who had saved thousands upon thousands. But more importantly, she had learned that being saved and saving others weren't separate acts. They were part of the same beautiful, endless cycle of love, hope, and human connection. And in homes across America and around the world, children were falling asleep in beds where they truly belonged, surrounded by families who loved them unconditionally, dreaming of bright futures made possible by a girl who had once had nothing but still found the courage to give everything. The story that began with a storm had become a legacy of sunshine, warming hearts and changing lives for generations to come. And this was still just the beginning.